Vineet, with your permission, I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience. We've got a lot of buzz that's happening.
Okay.
Let's see what. Apart from Sampark, Vineet, what would you like your legacy to be? How would you like to be remembered?
Forgotten.
You would like to be forgotten?
Yeah, I think, that is a trap. The only moment that is important is now, when I'm alive. The only moment that matters to me is now. The only thing which matters is, what do I do now? Who cares what you think of me tomorrow? Yeah. Do you think Hitler cares what you think of him? Yeah, he doesn't. Or Nelson Mandela, it doesn't matter. I live my life for today. I don't want any legacy. I don't want. Therefore, my legacy is, forget it. Do your stuff. That's it.
So, follow-up question to that is, and I think the answer to this is going to be no. But do you have any regrets?
Oh, many.
Could you share one of them with us?
Yeah, I think many. I think the first one is that I should have been kinder to many people. I'm a very straightforward, blunt, driven person. In my early days of Comnet, I think I was very, very rough. My argument were not nuanced, and I think I could have been more polished at that. I have a regret. Second was, in Comnet, we got a lot of money from JP Morgan, and I blew it up in the first 18 months, and we ran out of all cash. I have a regret. I could have used that money if I had taken focused bets. That's the reason I talk about that. My third regret is I should have started Sampark Foundation at least 5 years earlier than I did. I think I dragged my feet. I was trapped into the heady feeling of making a lot of money, getting yourself covered in newspapers, and I think I should have heard my mother or talked to my mother earlier. So I think these are some regrets I could have done differently, but I don't spend too much time thinking about it.
Thank you for your honesty, Vineet. Let's see. We've already talked about leadership skills. We've got a couple of startup founders that are in the audience as well. And they're wondering, with everything that's happening, and like you said, the world's been turned on its head, apart from finding one or two areas that they can focus on, what else should they be doing during this crisis? What would you recommend to them? You're a startup founder yourself at Sampark.
Yeah, I think a couple of things you need to be careful about. One is, all ideas which are flaky are going to get washed away. And it is very important for you to go back and look at your idea very, very carefully and saying, does it stand the test of the time? Which are three questions. Number one, is the idea different? Is there a reason that the customer should pay you? And third is there a reason that the customer should pay you and not your competitor? You need to ask these questions very honestly rather than get very excited with your own Kool-Aid. That's the first part of it. So this is the time to quit a bad idea and to invest in a good idea. Having gone through this diligence, if you're convinced that your idea is going to succeed, then this is a great time, because all the weak ideas are going to fall away. So my suggestion to all people who are out there thinking about this is, never ever has there been a better opportunity for you to be able to get your ideas going. So go for it.
Excellent. Go for it, guys. Whoever's listening. Vineet, a gentleman called Muhammad asked, how do you decide what is more important, money or passion?
No, I don't think more is important. Money is a critical factor for you to reach before you pursue something else. So therefore, first goal in life is to make sure that you are feeling secure about money. So it's a necessary condition. But getting to money is not going to give you the happiness which you seek in life. And you will very quickly realize that it's not the reason you were born. Now, the question about passion is a very interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can make money using the passion. And here is the theory which I have. If you invest in your passion, then you will be the best there is. A theater artist, a dancer, a painter, a public speaker, a motivator, a leader, a techie, if you're investing in your passion. If you are not investing in your passion and you're doing something else, you would not be the best in that business. So if you invest in the passion, my theory is you'll make more money than anybody else would. So in my mind, both of them go together hand in hand.
So essentially, if I'm hearing you right, not only do you need to have a passion, you need to be good at that passion so that people can actually pay you for it.
Right. What I'm saying is you cannot be good at something you're not passionate about. For example, today morning, I was telling my wife that my big goal in life is to make bread. I'm a friend of mine, Charles, would be on the call right now from France. He just texted me that he will be there. And the French bread is something which inspires me quite a lot. He's a professor at HEC, a very close friend of mine. And yes, so I said, my big aspiration and my big goal for this week is to cook a French bread. And she looked at me and said, forget it. You, no way, Jose. Well, so I don't know. It's small things in life. Yeah, it's really small things in life.
Vineet, you talked about inspiring employees. You talked about making sure that organizations and leaders are paying enough attention to them. What, according to you, are the two things that make for an engaging employee experience? There's a gentleman asking that.
There is I think it's a great question, and I'll appreciate if you can mention their names so that I can address them with their names. So
I'll try my best.
Okay. One of the, there's a story of an African tribe where when a child is born, or when the child is conceived, the mother writes a song for the child. And then as the child is born, she sings that song for the child. And that song is sung for the child in every, important day of the child. And that's the last time that song is sung for the child is when the child dies, as an adult. So they did a research which was very interesting, is that when the child starts crying miles away from the mother who is in the field cutting crop, the mother feels that the child is crying. Now, all of us know this, that the mother have an intuition that she knows that the child is in distress. But what they figured out in that research was that the moment the mother feels that the child is in distress, the mother starts singing a song miles away. And the moment the mother starts singing the song, the child can hear the song somehow and quietens down. That is what I call the power of intention. Now, it is very important that a unique employee experience can only be created if your intention is genuine. So the first thing you need to fix is get your intention straightened up. Is your intention genuine? Are you honest about it? Because employees will know what your intention is, irrespective of what you say. That's the first part of it. Right. Number two, do you truly believe that without the employees, you would not be able to get to where you want to be? And that is a very important aspect. And number three, and I think the most important thing, I do not understand the word called employee satisfaction. To me, measuring employee satisfaction is a waste of time. Satisfied employees don't do anything. Inspired employees, plumbers who want to fix leaks, diamond cutters, potters who want to create something more beautiful. So create a great employee experience is like a coach telling a football team that we have never ever participated in a World Cup football match, but we will win the cup this year, right? It's the way coaches inspire teams to do stuff they never ever believe they're capable of. That is a unique experience, and not these pizza parties and employee experience satisfactions. And that's crazy. I'm sorry, you got me on the wrong side.
No. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show, because of your authenticity and your frankness. You talked about Bollywood earlier, Vineet. Do you have a favorite movie? Do you have something that you enjoy watching, or it brings a smile to your face?
Everything. I watch a lot. I don't know how many of you are watching this Money Heist on Netflix. There is a character called Professor. If I was not doing this, I want to be a professor. I know police will come and arrest me, but what a brilliant mind. I mean, that guy is, 10 steps ahead. Roger Rabbit, I don't know how many of you have seen that movie. A brilliant movie. They've told the story of that whole Hitler movie from a lens which is completely different. I've never seen that before. So it's not one movie that inspires me, an angle inspires me. A. Rahman, when he came, Rosa is my all-time favorite. I have never heard these sounds ever in my life. And I sent out the Rosa song to all my employees. Dil hai chota sa choti si asha. I mean, that is, I played when I started ComNet. Recently, I heard Sarah Key. I don't know how many of you have heard Sarah Key. The kind of words, the kind of songs she writes are beautiful. So I believe that you can be inspired by Bollywood, by anybody, but always be a sucker. Always look for what can inspire you.
Thanks, Vineet. I have Rakesh Nandkumar asking, have you ever found yourself stuck in a business or in a professional situation, and what did you do to get yourself unstuck? Like a writer's block.
Yeah. Oh, right now. Give me 1 second.
Sure, of course.
Guys, this is my second book.
Wow.
And for the last so many pages. And I've not been able to get it done. Right? You're getting stuck. I'm stuck. I don't know how to get out of it. These are thousands of pages. I've written, but my heart doesn't say that I have something to say to you which you have not heard before. So people like me who are always exploring, always experimenting. I'll tell you a story. When I was a child, we were playing cricket, and one of my friends hit a ball and broke the window of my neighbor. He's a scientist in Nagpur. Mm-hmm. His name was Dr. Chalpati Rao. He was a very famous scientist, environmental scientist. So I went, because the ball was mine. I rang his bell. I went in and said, "Can I have my ball back?" He was very angry. And in those days, you can actually do anything to anybody's child, and your parents will actually celebrate that somebody's knocked sense into you. So he caught hold of me, took me inside, tied me to a chair, and I felt very angry, very humiliated. All my friends are making fun of me through that broken window. After a few minutes or hours or whatever it was, this is when I was 5. He let me go. I went up. There was a Sikh lady who inspired me a lot. Her name was Mrs. Anand. She called me up because I was crying. And she says, "What happened?" So I told her what happened. And she says, "What are you going to do about it?" And I told her again what happened. And she asked me again, "What are you going to do about it?" 5th or 6th time, I got it, that she is asking a very different question. I got down, went down, took a break, broke another window, pressed the bell again, and said, "Uncle, I had not broken the first window, but because you had given me punishment, this is the second window which I broke." So my mind always works like that. I am very destructive. I am very disruptive. And therefore, I'm always into situations which are very tricky. And I have always believed that 50% of those situations I will get out, and 50% of the situations I will not be able to get out. That is a risk I'm willing to take. So 50% of the situations I fail, I get humiliated, I get defeated, and I get disheartened. But 50% of the situations which I win, oh my God, that feeling is amazing. So I live for that 50%. I don't live for the 50% I lose.
So it's okay to fail, Vineet.
If you don't fail, you must remember 50% of your time. This is the most important thing I'm going to say on your show today.
Yes.
Every single person will fail 50% of the time. The difference between success and failure is not the percentage of failure. It is the speed at which you pick up the coin and toss again when you fail. So I have always believed that when you toss the coin, head or tail, you don't know. 50% of the time you get it wrong. It is the speed at which you toss the coin again. Always remember that. So if you are in the business of not brooding over your failures, not blaming somebody else for your failures, not blaming anybody else for your situation, but focusing on action, what can I do here and now? Nobody can prevent you from succeeding. Nobody.
Great words, Vineet. I have, let's see. I have Raghunath asking, are there any mindset changes that we should adopt while working from home during this entire pandemic?
Yeah. Raghu, I think it's a great question, and I'm also learning. So my advice is based on what I'm experiencing. Discipline. I think, for the first time in my life, I have never worked. When I started ComNet, I worked from home for 2 years. That time I didn't have children. But today it is very important for you to discipline. It is very important for you to get up. It's very important for you to take a bath. Very important for you to get dressed. Very important for you to wear a shirt or whatever it is, and don't do this t-shirt stuff, which I do. Right? And very important for you to say that you're going to focus on work. You can be sitting in your dining room, you can be sitting in your bedroom, because there is, your mind needs stimulation. And today the mind stimulation comes out of work. Give it that 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour, 8 hour, whatever you are, get that discipline going. That's one attitude change which you need to do. Number 2, you must understand that your productivity is going to increase by twice or thrice, predominantly because you're not going to travel and you're going to communicate the way we are communicating, right? Through Zoom, through all that stuff. So expect more from you, don't expect less from you. Now, this is very, very important for you all to understand that whenever there is an adversity, if your attitude is to expect more, you will go ahead in life. If your attitude is to say pause and this will go away and we will go back to the situation, you will lose in life. So first, get dressed, be ready, commit yourself to that intellectual stimulation. Number 2, expect more from you because of this adversity and this way of working, and not less. Once again, it'll be great. It'll be great output. And I hope, and I'm going to embarrass myself, next time I talk to you, this should be a book.
No, absolutely. And we'll make sure that we get you back just when this is about to be released or will be released. Vineet, would you, and this is a personal question, would you call yourself a perfectionist? Do you think that there is such a thing as a perfectionist?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is a little nuanced. I am in the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Okay.
Till the very end. And then I accept the imperfection. I am a sucker of the fact that if you are going to hit somebody,
mm-hmm.
you bloody hit it so hard that you break the jaw. In the end, you don't end up breaking the jaw, but you end up breaking your own hand. That's fine. But the attempt cannot be suboptimal. So I am a sucker of relentless pursuit of a perfection attempt. Okay. But I accept imperfections, failures when it comes to an end. To me, it is a sin not to give your best, because you have very limited number of hours, minutes, and seconds in this life. And in that minute, if you are not giving your best, but giving your second best, then you might as well not exist. Then you might as well go and eat worms in the garden. It is very important. It is very important for you to respect yourself. You were born for a reason. You were born with a gift for a reason. Get it out. Give the best shot you can. And the rest is fine. Yeah. So I'm not obsessed with the results, but I'm obsessed with an effort. I push everybody very hard, right? Including myself. Let's give it the best. Let's be unreasonable. Let's give it the best. But let's not agonize over results. हो गया, गलती हो गई, कोई बात नहीं यार, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. 50-50 का rule.
But were you the same way when you were leading well? Because in a professional environment or in a professional setup, and you've led, one of the biggest technology providers in the entire world, how can you not obsess over results? And, even if somebody is giving, let's say, a 90% effort, but they're not reaching the achieved results, is that success for you?
Yeah, it is. Because you have to understand that I'm going to answer this technically. There are what I call controllable issues and uncontrollable issues.
Correct.
Results is a combination of controllable and uncontrollable issues, right? Now, for example, we lost a very large order at Reader Digest in New York. The CEO called me and said that I've decided to give the order to a competitor. And I was very disheartened because we had worked very hard at it. So I said, do you have 10 minutes to talk to me? She said, yes. So I said, when can you meet? She says, at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I took a flight. I stayed from office, went to the airport, took a flight, landed in New York. Without a bath, I was at her doorstep for that 10-minute meeting. And she says, how did you come? I told her exactly, how did I come? And he says that, look at what I have done. And this is what you get from Team HCL, right? Every time you call, we will be at your doorstep. She was so, blown away from that she changed her decision and gave the order to us. So I do believe that you have to be completely ruthless, unreasonable in the attempts you make, including taking a flight, from the office. And my wife always thought I had a girlfriend out there because of which I ran. But being unreasonable in your attempt. And after that, if we had not got the order, we had not got the order. You cannot obsess with the result. One of the lazy leadership traits I've seen is people who are saying, you did this, you did not. They behave like gods, right? It's only 76%, and somebody says 24%, without understanding what goes in it. Lazy leaders do not apply their mind in terms of what goes into the success. And so it is very important for you to be measuring leading indicators rather than the results. Good leaders measure leading indicators. They don't measure results. The results are the basis. If you get the leading indicators right, the results will automatically fall in place.
Thank you, Vineet. I have Deep Nagpal asking that he works in an organization with over 4,500 employees. They've adopted digital methodology and transformation. How or what can he do to manage them better when everybody's working from home and the entire dynamics have changed overnight?
So what is very important is that there are two kinds of leadership which you can. One is task-based leadership, where you define tasks, right? And if you have a 4,500-man organization and you try and attempt a task-based leadership, you're going to fail predominantly because people are going to cheat on telling you they've done the task, they don't do it, or they do the suboptimal task. But if you define it as an outcome-based leadership, that we collectively need to achieve this outcome, and you keep your eye on that outcome, right, which is leading indicators that we need to get this done, and you make it a collective responsibility where everybody is watching over each other, and you celebrate those moments of achievements, and you say we're 20% done, we're 30% done, we, not you, we're 30% done, we're 40% done, then this remote working will succeed. It is very important in remote working to create the collective ownership of an end objective. If you in remote working, you cannot work if you create this as multiple tasks, multiple people are doing it, and you are the god who's curating it. So go for an objective-based leadership, objective-based, and it'll work. I can tell you that the way to think about it, as I told you right in the beginning, is to say that I want twice the productivity compared to my physical being in office. Remember, I told you unreasonable objective, unreasonable aspiration. So once you define that, you will find a way of being twice as productive.
And it's true, and I found that personally as well, because you have so many less distractions than you would if you were working in a normal work environment.
Yeah.
Vineet, I have a question for you all the way from, I believe, Norway, Liselette Engstam. Hi, Vineet. Do you believe boards should best support leadership and balance stakeholder interest as community and shareholders? How do you believe boards should?
Yeah. First is, I was listening to the podcast today on Norway. You guys are doing extremely well on coronavirus. Congratulations. Just keep the Swedes away. You have in control, and congratulations. You're opening your schools on, I guess, 23rd of April.
Correct.
And the best part of Norway, and everybody should know this, do you know that their prime minister did a press conference for the children of Norway? She did a press conference for the children of Norway, and she's going to do it again. I think next week she's going to do it again. So you guys have an exceptional leader. Now, when it comes to boards, pardon my saying it, but I think we make the boards to be larger than they are. Boards in most countries meet 6 times a year. They are largely a group of people who have other things in life, and they come together for 6 times. And therefore, boards are largely, in my mind, can deliver a check and balance on regulatory issues so that there is no fraud happening in the company. That also many boards have not been able to prevent. But to be able to get the boards to create a balance between multiple stakeholders, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that really comes down to executive leadership. Does the executive leadership believe that through inspired employees and through behaving in a socially responsible fashion, you can get more done? And only if the CEO believes that, it will happen. If the CEO doesn't believe it, it doesn't matter what the board thinks.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question, and I think it does. Are you having as much fun as I am, Vineet? Because we are getting all the questions from the entire spectrum.
Yes, this is wonderful. I'm glad. I hope, and I have said this in my post, please give me feedback on how I can improve.
They're already giving you feedback.
Oh, okay. I'm not saying it. I don't want to be distracted.
No, don't worry. I'll let you know. But you're doing great, Vineet. I have a question from Aman Zaidi. Coming from your point about a plumber looking for leaks, would you say that an employee that is challenging the status quo should be seen as a valuable asset instead of a problematic employee?
Aman, if this question is being asked by you as an employee or you as the management, let me answer that question as an employee. I always believe that you as an employee, before you challenge the status quo, you need to earn the right to challenge the status quo. Let me say it again. Before you challenge the status quo, you should earn the right to challenge the status quo. That means you should have demonstrated to the organization that you think different, that your ideas are great, and the fact that the way you think and the way you execute your ideas have created an impact on the organization. It is only then will the organization will hear you. Remember what I'm saying, I'll say it again. Every single employee should first earn the right to challenge the status quo before they challenge the status quo. Then you will get something done. For example, today, many people are criticizing Trump or Modi or this or that. They have not earned the right to criticize because they have not done anything in their life. People who have done something in their life, if they criticize an economic policy or if they criticize immigration policy, yes, then I'm willing to hear that. So that's the first part of it. The second part, if you're a leader, not an employee, you need employees to challenge status quo. Otherwise, you are a frog in the well. You need an organization. I'll tell you, even in Sampark Foundation, every time I have a decision to make, I write it out, I draft it out, I send it to my top, whatever, 15, 20 people, and saying, this is the draft decision. And think about it for 24 hours, and come back to me and saying, what is wrong with this decision? And 99% of the time, I end up changing the decision based on the feedback which I get. So it is all the sets of people who think differently, who give you feedback. So if you are a leader and asking that question, please do encourage people who challenge the status quo, because if you do not have employees who are challenging the status quo, then you are dead and you are the only person who doesn't know it.
That's great. I have a gentleman called Sanjay asking about your leadership style. What would you say your leadership style was at HCL?
Yeah, so Sanjay, you're going to get the worst out of me. First is never ask broad questions, right? Because you should ask questions, and this is the reason I am who I am, very honest and very blunt.
Of course.
The question you need to ask is, what is in it for you in this answer? Right? My leadership style has nothing to do with it. It's a very broad question. You should ask, you should try and be more specific in your questions. You will learn a lot more. So I go back to my leadership style in terms of what matters most to me. What matters most to me is, do I coexist with other people? Do other people enjoy my presence, or do other people hate my presence? Do other people feel inspired in my presence, or do people feel dispirited and demotivated in my presence? As long as you see yourself in the business of inspiring people, you have my leadership style. If you believe in controlling, commanding, communicating, I think you've completely got it wrong.
Thanks, Vineet. I have Kedar Chakradev asking, Vineet, have you ever been in a situation where you had to compromise your employee first philosophy or any other principle for the sake of a financial outcome? If yes, how did you make peace with that?
Right. Many times. Predominantly because, for example, the recession in 2008, every single IT company was getting rid of employees, and, everybody in HCL also believed that would have been the right answer. And therefore, every time a customer would cancel an order, you would say, get rid of employees. Every time a customer will ask for a discount, you will say, okay, let's have a cheaper employees. So the first response to any such challenge is an anti-employee policy, right? But a nuanced argument to that is there a way around this? Is there a way of inspiring people to get the benefit out of it? Now, I'll tell you an example that in 2008, we defined a policy called no HCLite left behind. That means we will not ask people to go. What really happened was that all our competition, the employees were scared of their own jobs, and therefore they were busy applying for jobs or searching for jobs. Whereas the people at HCL were trying very hard to go to the customer, and in that motivation, they were able to take market share away from the competition into HCL. So we never saw a negative year ever during recession, predominantly because the employees were motivated. And therefore, the decision we took of no HCL left behind resulted into a growth for HCL rather than a degrowth, which happened to many other competition. So yes, I have always been in situations where this Dharam Sankat has faced me. But I have fortunately so far come on the side of finding a way of turning the situation on its head and converting the challenge into an opportunity so that it gives me 10 times more return than a simple lazy decision of cutting cost or creating an anti-employee policies there. Did I do it? Did I get it right all the time? No. Have there been issues where we got rid of employees on performance issues which were wrong? Of course, yes. Were there issues where employees were not motivated, were not promoted when they deserved? Of course, yes. So I have my what I call cupboard full of many mistakes, but the intention has never been wrong. To me, intention is important. As long as the intention is right, you will take the right big decision when it counts. You will still get 50% of your decisions wrong, but the big decisions, you will always get them right. But 50% of the decisions, they will be wrong because you are a human being.
Absolutely. And I think the sooner you come to terms with that, the better. I have Sangeeta who's asking, if I want to become a CEO like you, what do I need to do?
Same thing. Believe in yourself, that you're special, and you were born for a reason. The way you were born, don't try and be Vineet. Don't try and be like anybody else. Be like yourself. Find that uniqueness in yourself. What makes you tick? Find your own management style. Center yourself on your management style, and then do the 4 things which I told you. Choose the right industry, choose the right company, choose the right team, and then just go for it. Relentless pursuit of perfection in the attempt. And don't get disheartened with the results. 50% of the time you will fail. It is 50% of the time you have to celebrate success. And
I think
drink good quality single malt.
I think you have a lot more fans out there than after that question, Vineet. I have Suguru Rajesh asking, moving forward for MSMEs and startups, what are some of the opportunities or industries that you see that will be flourishing because of this pandemic?
I think it's a wonderful question. I think every single industry is going to get disrupted. More and more people will want to work from home. Therefore, the entire infrastructure industry will get disrupted. The service industry will get disrupted. The way to think about this, and I'm still evolving my thought on this, but the way to think about it is that industrialization and automation brought in standardization, because of which we treat horses and donkeys identical. We have this bot which is responding to everybody identically without making a distinction between one person or the other person. I think there will be a lot more customization, and technology is going to be able to support that customization so that every single person is going to have a unique experience rather than a standardized experience. So in industrial age, it was all about standardization. In the new age, it is all about personalization. So if everything is going to move towards personalization, where is the opportunity for you, right? If you are thinking about personalization, and if you are in the business of either technology or service provision or everything, including that, Gola Store, that's the store's name. His name is also Gola Store. There's nothing great about it. But the fact that he delivers you that personalized experience is the reason everybody goes and buys from you. So that is what you need to think about it. Whether you are a manufacturer, whether you are a service provider, whether you're a technology developer, whether you're a recruiter, whether you are a team leader, are you thinking about creating opportunities in the personalized experience of the end customer who's going to pay? You could be a large company which sells goods and services to companies. I still remember this example, which is very important. So we were not doing great from a result point of view at HCL, and the reason is that everybody was twice our size or 3 times our size, and every time I'll tell a customer to give us some business, they will say, no, we want to give business to the number 1, number 2, number 3. You're number 5, so we don't want to give you business. So we decided to create a unique experience for our customers. So we did this in Florida, where we created, I still remember, a screen which is 120 feet by 60 feet screen. And we shot Chandni Chowk on camera. And on that 120 feet by 60 feet, it was Chandni Chowk live. So when the customers walked in, they were walking into an immersive experience of Chandni Chowk. With the sounds and noise and the scooter and the Amriti and the samosa and all that stuff. And they could never ever forget. It's a small thing, but they could never ever forget that this is a tech conference and they have brought Chandni Chowk to the tech conference, right? So we created a unique experience. So then we asked the feedback from the customers, and you will be amazed. So we had this, and we had many tech gurus giving speeches, and we had Bill Clinton, and we had everything there. But when we were asking feedback to the customer said, "Can I bring my wife next time? Can I?" And one of my biggest customers says, "Can I bring my mother next time?" And he actually brought his mother next time. So I think the power, you all listening to this, please, you overestimate the power of logic. You should, the power is in experiences, in creating unique experiences. So if you are an SME and you are creating unique experiences for the people who pay you, you'll succeed. Now, how you do it is where the startup idea is.
No, and I think Sanjay had a very similar question, that as a small startup, how do I establish credibility when all of my my competitors are big brand names, like you said?
Yeah, I think the beauty is in being small. So I'm an advisor to some small PE companies, to large PE companies, and what we do is we acquire companies at $100 million of revenue. We try and take them to $500 million of revenue, and my whole goal is to move from $100 million to $500 million in 3 years' time. So huge accelerated growth. And so the first thing which I tell all these companies is that small is beautiful. Now, you have to find out, why are you beautiful, right? So you are young, you're agile, you have to find that beauty. Now, you cannot say, "I will." You have to show the customer. So how can you create unique experiences for the customer, which the large companies can't? Large companies are boring, they are dull. You ask any employee working in a large company, that guy is really, he'll give an arm and a length to work for a small company, which is an exciting place where everybody's in friend and you're drinking yourself silly, and you have families together. It's a fantastic culture. Now you have to get the best out of small and show it to the customer that it cares. Your employee cares. I still remember a CEO of a very large company came to me and said, "Vineet, we are canceling the order because you are small and somebody else is large." I said, "That's great." This is a very large pharma company out of East Coast. And I said, "Okay, that's great. So why don't you just spend half an hour with the team which has been working for you?" We had a small team working for him. And he went in, he says, "Okay, I'll talk to them." I said, "Only there will be one condition, that anybody with a manager designation from HCL side will walk out of the room." So all the managers, including me, we walked out. We left him alone with the group of, I think, about 100 employees. And he was there for 1.5 hours. When he came out, he was sweating. He says, "My God, what kind of employees do you have?" And then he looked at his CIO and said, "I need to fire you. This is the team I want to work." So, you have to find your strength. In HCL, my strength was my employees. I'm very clear. The reason of HCL success is its employees, right? The motivation of their employees. They are completely rock solid, gold standard sets of bunch of guys. I don't know, I was blessed to have them. But a CEO of a Fortune 500 company was sweating in their presence after 1.5 hours, and he completely consolidated the business with us, and he became amongst the first, I think, $300 or $400 million customer for HCL, just because what those 100 people did in that room. I still don't know what they did in that room.
That's
but
amazing.
Just because. So find your strength, find the uniqueness in that smallness, and show it to the customer. You will win.
No, Vineet, and I think you're selling yourself short by saying that your strength was your employees. I think one of your strengths was actually even bringing out the best in your employees. And the fan mail and the text messages that we're already getting is amazing. Last couple of questions, Vineet. I know you must be having other plans as well for the rest of the evening.
I'm glad.
we could keep going all night, but I'll probably stop after just one or two. Last three questions. Done. I have Sarmeet Oberoi asking, and this is a personal question as well as a professional one. When you are putting in so much in terms of time and emotion to succeed at work, how do you explain or take your family and personal relationships along in the journey? How do you make them share the dream that only you are seeing?
Very, very difficult. I think I would say this is a toughie. What's the name of the person who asked?
Sharmeet Oberoi.
Sharmeet.
Yes.
I think this is a question I'm struggling with right now. I have a daughter, and she asked me the same question yesterday. In a complex environment, and I have come to believe that when two people get married, they come from completely different school of thoughts, right? They are completely different set of people. They come with completely different school of thought, and therefore having identical thinking about the future is not possible, because somebody comes from anxious type A personality, afraid of the future. Somebody comes from secure personality, where future is bright and the God will take care of everything. So it is very difficult to converge on having a similar thought. Therefore, I would suggest, and I'm not an expert on this, to converge on similar actions. So as long as the conversations are on actions, I think you will succeed. Just focus on actions. Okay. What actions can we will have all dinners we will have together. All holidays, my phone will be off. As long as you can converge on actions, instead of having any emotive conversations, whether life is important, quality is important, family is important, work is important, have conversations on what specific actions you can do. I think you will survive through this. Hopefully.
Thank you. Absolutely. No, that's a great perspective. I have Jaggi J mentioning, I'm an entrepreneur and I've failed 4 times. I'm working currently in a corporate company in Bahrain. How can I be focused so that I can start my entrepreneurship again, even though I'm enjoying my corporate life? So he seems to be quite in your words, a dharam sankat.
Yeah, I believe you have only one life and you're going to die pretty soon, right? All of us are. So if you're enjoying corporate life, keep enjoying it. Nobody who is satisfied has done anything in life. The core start point of doing anything great in life is dissatisfaction. For example, I'm very unhappy today with this, right? Now, the only reason something will happen is because I'm very unhappy. And I keep telling them, you idiot, of course, you can't even write a book. So if you don't tell yourself that you're unhappy, you will not succeed. So therefore, if you say I'm happy, man, don't try anything. You're happy. That's it. Only unhappy people are able to do something in life.
I think it's that perspective of grass is always greener on the other side that that kind of messes a lot of things up. So one last question for you, Vineet. But before that, I have a personal question. Can you share what your next book is going to be about?
No, I can't.
No? Okay.
Because
I'm trying to get that out of you.
Because I'm not convinced that I have something to say which is meaningful for the readers to read. The benchmark which I set for myself is the fact that I have to say something which you have not heard before. And I've not reached that place. So I don't know what it is all about.
Got it. So one last question for you from Jazz Core. What is the reason that we have very less women at your level, Vineet? Is it the will? Is it the confidence? Or do they select family over professional growth? What message would you like to give to the women globally so that they can come out and focus on their careers? I think it's a great question to end it as well.
Right. I think first is 80% of leadership in Sampark Foundation is women. So, this is something I failed. You were talking about failures and regrets. This is one regret I have about HCL Technology. We didn't have enough women leaders, but in Sampark I fixed it, and we have a wonderful set of women leaders, and they are fantastic.
Incredible number.
But here is my point to all women leaders. I don't know what I don't want to be generic about it. I think the reason you are different is because you were meant to be different. In that difference is your uniqueness. Don't try and ape the men. Don't try and be them. Don't try and conform to them. they will try very hard for judging you on the number of hours you spend, or the bars you go, or the drinking you do. But don't be foolish. In the end, the results count. Never ever leave your uniqueness. And as long as you do not leave your uniqueness, you'll be okay. So the reason you are a woman is because you're special. You have something the men don't. Find that special in yourself and make it count. And if you do that, nothing can prevent you from succeeding in life.
Thank you so much, Vineet. Vineet, I'd like to use your own words, if I may, that you are special. And I think the attendance and the popularity of this chat has shown us really how special you are. We've had people that have worked.
Give me feedback. Give me feedback.
Well, we have your LinkedIn post that we can make sure that we count people on to put comments and give feedback. If I receive anything on my own, I'll make sure that I forward that to you as well.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Absolutely. And this will pass. This will pass. The only thing is, some of us will emerge stronger from this, and some of us will appear weaker from this. Appear stronger, emerge stronger from this whole event. Thank you. God bless you, and take care of your families.
Thank you so much, Vineet. All the best to you and Sampark Foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all your participation. I hope you had as much fun interacting with Vineet as I did. We tried to get to all of your questions, but there was just not enough time. Hopefully, if Vineet agrees, we'll try and invite him back for round 2 of Ask Vineet Anything. Keep watching, and we'll have another exciting guest lined up for you next Friday at 5 p.m. So look forward to seeing all of you back then. Thank you, and take care.